Picture a kitchen table, not a nice one, not the kind with turned legs and a drawer full of silverware. A rough table. Uneven planks nailed together by someone who needed a table more than he needed a carpenter. The kind of table that rocks if you put a cup down in the wrong corner, so you learn which corners are safe and which ones will spill your coffee. The kind of table with knife marks in the wood from 10 years of meals, and a dark stain near the edge where something burned once before anyone could stop it. Now put a book on that table, not a Bible, though it's about the same size, not a dictionary, a catalogue. The Sears, Roebuck and Company Consumer's Guide, edition of 1897. 786 pages, £2 3 ounces. The pages so thin you can almost see through them, but there are so many of them that the whole thing is nearly 3 inches thick. The cover is plain, the spine is plain. Nothing about the outside tells you what's inside, but you know what's inside. Everyone knows. Add to that table a kerosene lamp throwing yellow light across the room, because the sun went down 2 hours ago and you were doing chores until it did. Add the smell of the lamp itself, that slightly oily, slightly sulphurous smell that lives in every room that can't afford candles and isn't wired for electricity. Add the smell underneath that, which is the smell of the house itself, which is sod. Yes, sod. You live in a house made of cut blocks of Kansas earth, and no matter what you do to it, it smells like earth, like something damp and heavy and ancient. It seeps into everything, your clothes, your hair, your dreams. Add wind outside. There is always wind in Kansas. Always. When the wind stops, you wake up in the night from the silence, because silence isn't right. The wind is the sound of the plains breathing, and it never really stops. Now add the smell of your father's boots drying near the stove, which is a particular kind of smell that people who haven't grown up with it can't really describe. Leather and manure and hard work and something like lanolin, which is sheep fat, and you don't even have sheep. You have a cow and some chickens and a lot of debt. The boots just smell that way. That's your kitchen. That's your house. That's November of 1897, somewhere in the middle of the Kansas plains, far enough from anywhere that a trip to town is an event worth planning. Far enough that you can hear the silence between wind gusts, and it sounds like the inside of a church, except bigger. Far enough that the nearest neighbour is 3 miles away, which means 3 miles in any direction, and on a clear day you can stand at the corner of your property and see all the way to his fence line and not see a single tree, a single building, a single human being moving across the flat face of the world. That is where you live. Now look at the catalogue. You've had it for 4 days. 4 days since your father came back from town with the mail, which he does every week and a half or so, depending on weather and need. He set it on the table and didn't say anything about it. Your mother came out of the back room where she was sewing and looked at it and didn't say anything either. Your younger sister, who is 9, immediately grabbed for it, and your father said, quiet and final, after supper. And so you waited. You ate supper in the kind of hungry silence that means the food isn't quite enough, but it's what there is. Salt pork and boiled potatoes and day-old bread with butter that your mother made on Tuesday and is running low. And after supper your father moved the plates aside and put the catalogue in the middle of the table and opened it. And that was when your family looked at everything you couldn't afford. I make these history stories, and I'm honestly not sure most of you are asleep before I start talking about catalogue prices. But either way, I hope this is the kind of thing you settle into. The kind of thing that puts you somewhere else, somewhere specific. Because that's what history actually is, at its best. Not dates, not battles. People sitting at tables with catalogues in their hands, dreaming about what comes next. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your name is James Calloway. You're 16 years old. You've lived in Barton County, Kansas for 4 years, which means you remember the train that brought you here from Ohio and the way everything flattened out as you got further west. The trees disappearing first, then the hills, then even the variations in colour, until the world outside the window was just a long brown line with a thin blue line above it, and you thought, this can't be right. This can't be where we're going. But it was. You arrived in the summer of 1893, which was, if you knew anything about the world beyond your property line, about the worst possible time to arrive. The panic of 1893 had already been grinding down farms for months. Banks were calling in loans. Crop prices had collapsed so badly that some farmers burned their corn for fuel because corn was cheaper than coal, and burning it was better than watching it rot unsold. Your father had bought land here because land in Kansas was cheap, and he had come with a plan and a little money, and the kind of hope that only makes sense when you're looking at it from a distance. Close up, hope had gotten complicated. The first year was fine. Good weather, decent wheat crop. Your father paid down part of his debt and bought the cow and said things would come right. The second year the grasshoppers came. You have never seen anything like it before or since. The sky going dark in the afternoon, and not from clouds but from a living cloud. Millions of insects descending on everything green and eating it down to nothing. They ate the wheat, they ate the corn, they ate the handle of the shovel your father left leaning against the fence. They ate the cotton sacking you had hung over the vegetable garden. They left, and the land looked like it had been scraped clean. Your father didn't say anything for 3 days. Your mother cried once quietly, when she thought no one could hear. The third year there was drought. Not a dramatic drought, not the kind that makes newspapers. A slow drought, the kind where it just doesn't rain quite enough for long enough that the wheat comes in thin and pale and wrong. Half the usual yield. Your father calculated the numbers on a scrap of paper at the kitchen table, and then folded the paper and put it in his pocket and went outside and didn't come back in until it was dark. This is the 4th year. The harvest came in better, not good. Better. The debt is still there, sitting on everything like a hand pressing down. The mortgage payment is due in February. It's November now. But there's the catalogue on the table. Here is what the Sears catalogue is in 1897 for someone who lives where you live. It is everything. That sounds like an exaggeration. It isn't. 786 pages. Every page filled with things you can buy, priced clearly, with no negotiation, no social performance, no judgment about who you are or how you smell, or whether your boots are good enough to walk into a shop. You write down what you want on a piece of paper. You send the paper with money, cash or money order, to Chicago. 6 to 8 weeks later, or sometimes less, sometimes more, a package arrives at your county post office. You go collect it. That's the whole transaction. No one looks at you sideways. No one says the thing cost more than what was printed because you don't look like you can negotiate. No one asks if you're sure you want that item in a voice that means you don't look like the kind of person who should be buying that item. The price is the price. It's printed right there on the page, and the prices are low. That's the other thing. Lower than the general store in Great Bend, lower than the store in Ellinwood, sometimes so much lower that you wonder how it's possible. The reason is Chicago and rail lines and volume. Richard Sears is buying from manufacturers by the tens of thousands and passing some of that savings on to you, the person 3 states away with the sod house and the debt and the catalogue on your kitchen table. The catalogue itself, the physical object, arrived through the mail for free. Well, not for free exactly. If you ordered something last year, you're on the list. If you didn't, you had to send 4 cents. But for most families who bought anything at all, the catalogue just appears. Twice a year, spring and fall, like a gift from a company that mostly wants you to spend money but at least has the courtesy to give you something beautiful to look at while you're deciding. Your family has had the full catalogue for 4 days. Tonight, after supper, your sister Margaret is lying on her stomach on the floor near the stove with the catalogue open to the ladies' clothing section, tracing the pictures with one finger, not touching, just outlining the shapes of dresses she will never own. Her lips are moving slightly. She's reading the descriptions. Fine quality ribbed cashmere, she whispers to herself, in deep plum or forest green. She doesn't look up. She's somewhere else entirely. Your mother is at the table with the section on sewing supplies. She's made a list on a piece of brown paper bag. The list has 6 items and 2 of them have question marks next to them. She's calculating something in her head. Her lips pressed together, her finger running down a column of prices. Your mother has a way of moving through calculations that looks like she's working through an argument. Like the numbers are saying something unreasonable, and she's deciding whether to accept it. Your father isn't in the room right now. He's in the barn. He's always in the barn when he needs to think without being watched. And you've got the section on farm tools open, and you're staring at a pump. A cast-iron hand pump, the kind that draws water up from a well without you having to lower a bucket and haul it back up, which is what you do now, every morning, which is fine in summer and misery in winter when the rope gets ice on it, and your hands hurt so much after the first 3 pulls that you keep going, only because stopping isn't a choice. The pump costs $4.38. You look at it for a long time. Let me tell you what $4.38 means in November of 1897 in Barton County, Kansas. Your father pays you no wages. You're his son. You work the farm. That's how it works. This isn't cruelty. It's just arithmetic. There is no extra money for wages. What the farm earns goes first to the mortgage payment, second to seed for spring, third to feed for the animals through winter, fourth to basic supplies you can't produce yourself. Flour, salt, coffee, when there's money for it, kerosene. What's left after all of that is not much. Some years it's almost nothing. Some years your father looks at the account he keeps in a small ledger and closes the ledger and doesn't open it again for a week. A day labourer, a man who hires himself out for ploughing or harvest work, earns about $1 a day, maybe $1.25 in peak season. A domestic servant, a woman working in a house in town, earns about $2 a week with room and board. $4.38 is a lot of money. And yet, the pump would change things. Not symbolically, not in some inspirational way. Practically, physically, it would change things. Right now, every drop of water your family uses comes up from a well by hand. Drinking water, cooking water, water for the animals, water to wash clothes. You haul probably 40 gallons a day in winter, more in summer. That's 40 trips to the well and back, or 20 trips with 2 buckets, or some combination of trips and hauling that adds up to an hour or more every single day just to have water. An hour that could be used for something else. An hour of your mother's back not hurting. An hour of your hands not cracking. The pump would sit over the well. You'd push the handle down and the water would come up. That's it. That's the whole miracle. $4.38. You're thinking about it when your father comes in from the barn. He stamps his boots twice at the door. Old habit. He takes off his coat and hangs it on the hook and goes to the wash basin and pours a little water from the pitcher, which you carried up this morning, and washes his hands. He's a tall man, your father, taller than you by 3 inches, though you're still growing. His face has the particular look of a Kansas farmer in his mid-40s, which means it's been worked on by sun and wind to the point where it's hard to tell how old he is. He could be 40, he could be 55, he's 43. He dries his hands on the rough cloth hanging next to the basin and looks around the room. Margaret is still murmuring to herself about cashmere. Your mother doesn't look up from her list. Your father sits down at the table, picks up the catalogue where you've left it open, and looks at the pump. Silence. That one? He asks, not to you specifically. It's the right size for our well, you say, 18 feet. The catalogue says this model is rated to 25. He turns the catalogue slightly, looking at the measurements printed below the illustration. The illustration shows a clean, tidy pump with good light falling on it, and a woman who has clearly never had to carry a bucket in her life standing next to it with a satisfied expression. Your father looks at the price. $4.38, he says. Yes, sir. He sets the catalogue down. He doesn't say no. He doesn't say yes. He picks up the small cup of coffee your mother has left near the lamp and drinks some of it, and the sound of the wind against the sod walls is the only sound in the room for a while. Hardware at Draper's would want $7.50 for something like that, your mother says, without looking up. Hardware at Draper's wants whatever it wants, your father says, in a tone that means the subject of Draper's hardware is complicated, and he doesn't want to open it tonight. But he doesn't put the catalogue away. Here is something you should understand about Mr. Draper and his hardware store, and about every store in every small Kansas town in 1897, and about the thing that makes the Sears catalogue more than just a shopping convenience. The general store in a small town is not just a store, it's a system. In a world where most farm families are running on credit, the local merchant is the person who extends that credit. You need flour in February, but you won't have wheat money until July? Fine. Draper puts it on your account. You need harness leather in April? It goes on the account. Wire fencing, coal oil, seed, if your stored seed didn't make it through a wet winter, it all goes on the account. And because it's on the account, and because Draper is the one who decides how much credit you get and when he wants payment, and because there are only 2 hardware stores within 20 miles, and neither of them is willing to undercut the other 2 badly, Draper charges what he charges, and what he charges is more than the catalogue. Sometimes a little more, sometimes considerably more, and there's nothing you can do about it except pay it, because you need the credit more than you need the savings. This is not a conspiracy. It's just how things work. Draper has overhead. He has staff. He has a building with a furnace and a storeroom and a loading dock. He has to pay for goods to be shipped to his store by rail and then transported out to his shelves. He has to extend credit to dozens of families and absorb the ones who can't pay. His margins aren't outrageous. He's not a villain. But he's also not on your side. When the Sears catalogue arrived in force in the early 1890s, and then exploded in reach after 1896, when rural free delivery started letting people get their mail at home instead of at a post office in town, men like Draper saw the numbers change. They saw accounts go thinner. They saw families who used to buy everything in store starting to show up only for the things they couldn't order. Things needed urgently, things too bulky to ship, things that needed to be touched and fitted. The small, precise, lightweight things that made up so much of a general store's profit started flowing toward Chicago. Some merchants organized, some towns held catalogue burnings. You've heard about those, though you've never seen one. A local merchant stands up at a meeting or a church social and delivers a speech about community loyalty and keeping money in the local economy and the importance of buying from a man you know over a company 1,000 miles away. Then someone suggests burning the catalogues, and enough people go along with it that a pile of Sears and Montgomery Ward catalogues gets set on fire in the street, and the merchant feels better for about 2 weeks before the next shipment of catalogues comes out from Chicago and lands in everyone's mailboxes again. Your father has a complicated relationship with this dynamic. He grew up in Ohio, where the general store credit system is also how things worked, and he understands that a man in debt to a merchant is not a fully free man. He knows Draper's prices are higher than they need to be. He also knows that if he starts ordering too much from the catalogue, and Draper hears about it, and Draper decides to call in his account or reduce his credit line before February, when the mortgage is due, that could be worse than any savings. It's a calculation that isn't in any catalogue. Morning on the farm comes before you're ready for it. It comes while it's still dark. The kind of dark that isn't a transition state but a full condition. The black outside the window, total and complete, and the only light anywhere, the faint orange of the fire your mother has already started in the kitchen stove, 'cause she is always up before you, and you have never once in your life woken up to find her still asleep. The cold hits you when you get out from under the blankets. November cold. Not the worst of the year, but close enough. The sod walls hold heat better than wood, which is one of the few advantages of a sod house. The heat from the stove has made the kitchen livable. The back room, which is where you and Margaret sleep on opposite sides of a curtain hung from a cord, is not quite livable but is survivable. Your feet find the floor, which is packed dirt under a braided rag rug your mother made from worn-out clothes. The rug is more important than it looks. Without it, the floor is just earth, cold and slightly damp in November, pulling heat out of your feet with every step. You pull on your pants, your shirt, your second shirt over the first, your suspenders, socks, 2 pairs. Boots that need new soles in the spring, a fact your father has mentioned twice, and which lives in your head as one of the low-grade ongoing calculations of winter planning. Your coat goes on last, a heavy wool coat your father bought 3 years ago, dark brown, a little large on you when you got it and now exactly right. You go to the kitchen, which smells like coffee and wood smoke and the beginning of something hot on the stove, though you won't eat until after morning chores. You splash water from the basin on your face. It's cold, cold enough to make you flinch. You don't heat the washing water in the morning. That would take time you don't have and use fuel you're careful with. The pump is still on the page where you left the catalogue last night. You don't look at it. You put on your hat and go outside. The cold outside is a different kind of cold than inside. Inside cold is still, sitting in corners, manageable. Outside cold in November in Kansas has the wind in it, and the wind makes it personal. It comes from the northwest, always from the northwest this time of year, and it finds the gap between your hat and your coat collar, and it works its way in. Your ears go numb first, then your nose, then your fingers, despite your gloves, which have a hole in the right thumb that you've been meaning to fix. The sky is grey-black with a faint line of lighter grey along the eastern horizon. Not dawn, not yet. Just the suggestion of dawn somewhere to the east, behind all those flat miles. The barn is 30 yards from the house, long enough that you're thoroughly cold by the time you get there. The barn door resists a little, swollen with moisture, and you lean into it with your shoulder, and it gives with a groan, and the smell of the barn comes out at you like a physical thing. Warm animal smell, hay, manure, the complex interior weather of a space that holds living things all winter. The cow, who your mother has named Josephine and your father calls the cow, turns her head to look at you with the specific expression of a dairy cow, who knows it's milking time and has no particular feelings about it either way. She's a large, patient brown animal, and milking her is not a quick process. You settle onto the three-legged stool, the bucket goes underneath. You start, and the rhythmic sound of milk hitting the pail is one of the steadier sounds in your mornings. Your hands know this. Your hands have done it thousands of times, the grip and pull and release, alternating, pulling down and back, and the cow stands and chews, and occasionally shifts her weight in a way that makes you shift too. Your hands are cold at first, but the warmth of the cow's body and the work itself warms them. Your fingers stop hurting after the first minute. While you're milking, the chickens in their pen at the back of the barn begin making the sounds chickens make when they know morning is happening. Not quite awake, not quite asleep, somewhere in between, making half sounds. You'll feed them after this. Then the water, which is the part you're dreading. The well is at the back of the property, closer to the barn than to the house, which was sensible placement and is still far enough in November cold to make the trip unpleasant. You'll carry 2 buckets for the barn animals first, then 2 more for the house, then 2 more to top off the barrel in the kitchen that your mother uses for cooking and washing. 6 trips. The pump is $4.38. You finish milking, carry the pail carefully back to the barn door, set it on a shelf your father built for exactly this purpose. You feed the chickens. You go to the well. The well casing is wood, old now, the rope wound around an iron crank. The bucket is iron, dented, heavy even before it has water in it. You lower it down into the darkness, which is a long darkness, 18 feet of rope before you hear the splash, and then you wait for it to fill, which takes longer than you think it should every single time, and then you crank it back up, which takes the particular kind of effort that starts in your arms and moves into your shoulders after the first few cranks, and by the time the bucket clears the top of the casing, your hands are shaking a little from the cold and the effort combined. You fill the first barn bucket. You lower the well bucket again. This is your morning. This is every morning. By the time you've done the morning water and the feeding and checked on the small pile of wood under the lean-to to make sure it hasn't shifted in the night, and you haven't lost any under a collapsed section of the covering, by the time you've gone back in and stripped off your outer coat and your second layer, and washed your hands in water that is not quite hot enough to fully remove the smell of the barn, breakfast is on the table and your father is already in from whatever early morning thing he was doing, and Margaret is sitting with her hands in her lap, wearing the expression of someone who would like to still be asleep and knows better than to say so. Breakfast is cornmeal mush, the thick kind, with a small pour of molasses over it. Your mother has cut yesterday's bread into slices and toasted them on the stovetop. The coffee is good, strong, genuine coffee, which your father refuses to give up even when money is extremely tight. A man can do without most things, he said once, in a tone that meant the subject was closed, but not without coffee. You eat and don't talk much. Your family's not a quiet family in the evenings. In the evenings there's the catalogue and your mother's opinions on it, and Margaret's running commentary on everything in the clothing section, and your father's occasional observations delivered in the flat, careful voice of a man who has learned to calculate before speaking. But mornings are mostly silent. There's too much work ahead to spend energy on words. After breakfast, the catalogue is still on the table. Your mother puts the dishes in the basin and says, without turning around, "I'm going to send for the buttonhole thread and the darning needles." Your father pours a second cup of coffee. "Fine," he says, "and I want to send for the children's long underwear. 2 sets for Margaret, 1 for James." A pause. She's still not turning around. "Fine," your father says. "The total comes to $1.74 including shipping." Another pause. Your father drinks his coffee. "Fine." Your mother turns around then. She has look on her face that isn't quite a smile but is in the same neighbourhood. She goes to the back room where she keeps the small tin box with the household money, the thing separate from your father's farm account, the money from egg selling and from the butter she sells in town twice a month. The money that is technically hers in the way that things can technically belong to a woman who has no legal right to a bank account. She comes back with $1.75 and a penny. She sits down with a piece of paper and begins writing out the order form from memory, because she has already memorized the catalogue item numbers for the things she wants, because she has been looking at them for 4 days. You watch her write. Her handwriting is better than your father's, better than yours. She learned to write from a schoolteacher in Pennsylvania before her family moved west, and she writes with a kind of precision that means she was taught by someone who believed it mattered. The catalogue order form has small boxes for each item, the number, the colour if applicable, the quantity, the price. She fills them in one at a time, neat and careful, the pen barely scratching the paper. The pen is a dip pen, the kind you fill from an inkwell. She holds it correctly at a precise angle, and you watch the ink letters form and think about the distance between this table and Chicago. Sears, Roebuck and Company. 179 to 189 Fulton Street, Chicago, Illinois. That's where the order is going. That's where the warehouse is. A building you've never seen and can't really imagine. Enormous by any standard you have. Packed with everything in the catalogue plus things that didn't make it into the catalogue. All of it organised and ready to be pulled from shelves by men you'll never meet, and packed into boxes and put on rail cars heading in every direction. The rail cars are an invisible network, the same network that brought your family here from Ohio, that brings news and goods and everything that makes this land livable. The rails go everywhere now, even to Great Bend, 20 miles away, and from Great Bend a wagon road runs out to the county post office, and from there the mail carrier brings it to you. 6 to 8 weeks, the catalogue says, for delivery. That's a long time. That's the price of the distance. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that makes the catalogue something different from just a list of cheaper prices. Before the catalogue, if you wanted buttonhole thread and it was November and you lived 20 miles from the nearest town with a proper dry goods store, you had one option. You loaded the wagon, you hitched the horse, or if the horse was being used for something else, you waited. You drove 20 miles, which takes most of a morning on good roads, and most of a day if the roads are bad, and this time of year the roads can be very bad. The rut's frozen hard in the early morning and then thawed into mud by afternoon, capable of swallowing a wagon wheel up to the axle if you hit the wrong spot. You got to the store, you bought your thread, paid whatever the store was asking, and you drove 20 miles back. That's what getting thread cost before. Now it costs a stamp and 6 weeks. Your mother understands this more precisely than anyone in your family, because she is the one who needed thread and couldn't have it, who needed a particular size of darning needle, and settle for the wrong size because that's what Draper had, who needed fabric in a specific colour for a specific project and got told they'd have to order it special, which means waiting 3 weeks and paying extra for Draper's trouble. She understands this so well that she started her catalogue list in September when the fall edition arrived and added to it over 2 months, and now has it refined down to exactly what she needs and what she can afford with the money from the eggs and the butter. She folds the order form carefully, writes the Sears address on the envelope, seals it, writes her return address in the upper corner. She holds it in both hands for a moment, looking at it. "James," she says, "next time you go to the post office, take this." "Yes, ma'am." She sets it on the shelf by the door next to the other letters waiting to go. Margaret has picked up the catalogue again and has turned to the section on toys, which she's definitely too old for, but which contains, apparently, something worth looking at. You can hear her turning the pages slowly, the thin paper barely making a sound. Your father gets up from the table, puts on his coat, and goes out to start on whatever the day needs from him. You sit at the table for 1 more minute, in the warmth of the stove, listening to the wind outside and the turning of catalogue pages and the faint sound of your father's boots crossing the frozen ground toward the barn. Then you get up and go out too. The town is called Ellenwood. It's not big. It has a main street, which is what you call it, because there is essentially one street with things on it, the other streets being more aspirational than actual. The main street has 2 general stores, a hardware store which is Draper's, a bank, a barber shop, a feed and grain supplier, a post office that is also an office for the telegraph, a saloon that pretends to be a hotel, a church that is also a meeting hall for anything requiring a meeting, and a new building that went up last spring which is supposed to become a school as soon as the county finds a teacher and furnishes it properly. There are about 300 people in Ellenwood and the surrounding farm country if you count generously. You come to Ellenwood every week to 10 days, sometimes with your father, sometimes alone if he's needed at the farm and the errand is simple. The trip is 8 miles. On a good day, 2 hours by wagon. In winter, you dress for it. The main street in November smells like horse. That's the primary smell. Horses standing at the hitching post outside every establishment. Horses pulling wagons. Horses moving up and down the street on whatever business horses are directed toward. The secondary smell is wood smoke from every chimney on the street. The tertiary smell, which you only notice when the wind comes from the south, is the feed and grain store, which has a specific smell compounded of oats and corn and something like dust and sweetness combined. Underneath all of it, when the wind shifts, is the smell of the creek that runs behind the south side of the street, which in November smells like cold mud and dead cattails. You ride in on a Wednesday in mid-November with the letter in your coat pocket and a list from your father of things to ask about at the feed store, and a letter to the bank that you're not supposed to open or read, but that you understand is about the mortgage. You tie the horse at the post outside the post office, which is a small building, barely large enough to contain the postmaster's desk, a wall of small mailboxes and 2 people standing at the counter at once. The postmaster is Mr. Kettner, a round man with a red face and very small glasses that look like they belong on someone who isn't him. He seems uncomfortable in his own glasses. He's holding them up on his nose when you come in, squinting at a piece of paper. "Callaway," he says without looking up, which means he recognised either your footstep or your coat. "Got 2 for you." He hands over 2 envelopes, a copy of the Kansas City paper your father subscribes to, the weekly edition, and something with a Chicago postmark. You look at the Chicago envelope. It's from Sears. You haven't sent an order yet. This must be... You turn it over and see the small printed text on the back. Sears, Roebuck and Company, special offers. A supplement. A smaller catalogue of special sales sent to families already on the mailing list. You put it in your pocket with the letter from your mother and hand Kettner the bank letter and the penny for postage. Anything else? My father's looking for any news of road conditions north toward Hoisington, thinking about making a run to the grain elevator before weather sets in. Kettner leans on the counter. He has opinions about road conditions. He expresses them. You listen, filing the information. The North Road is fine for now, Kettner says, though a freight driver came through Monday saying the low section near the creek crossing had soft spots. Worth watching. You thank him and go out. Draper's Hardware is next. 'Cause your father needs to know the price on a specific kind of bolt, not to buy it, just to know if the catalogue price is actually better, which is the kind of reconnaissance that happens constantly between the catalogue world and the store world. You've watched your father do this calculation for months now. He notes prices at Draper's, notes prices in the catalogue, accounts for shipping, accounts for wait time, weighs the relationship cost of ordering from Sears rather than buying local, decides accordingly. Sometimes the catalogue wins. Sometimes Draper wins, because a thing you need immediately can't wait 6 weeks regardless of price. The hardware store smells like metal and oil and sawdust. It is narrow and long, and every surface has something on it. Bins of bolts organised by size, coils of wire, hand tools hanging on pegs. Behind the main counter, a wall of small wooden drawers, each one labelled with a cramped hand. Draper himself is behind that counter, which is where he always is. He's a thinner man than you'd expect for the kind of heavy work he sells equipment for, with the careful eyes of someone who tracks inventory in his head. He watches you come in. Callaway, he says. The tone is not unfriendly, but it is measuring. You give your father's inquiry about the bolt. Draper goes to one of the small drawers, checks the stock, quotes you a price. You write it in the small notebook you carry for this purpose. Draper watches you write it down. Getting the catalogue prices, are we? He says. Not a question exactly. Just noting the figure for my father. Draper is quiet for a moment. A customer comes in behind you, and Draper shifts his attention there, but you can still feel the quality of his silence, which has something in it. Not hostility, not exactly. Something more like the feeling of a man who's been watching something happen to his world and has things to say about it, but knows it won't change anything. You put the notebook in your pocket and say thank you and go out. The feed and grain store takes longer. Your father's instructions about the inquiry require back and forth with the store owner, a man named Schillinger, who is half German and entirely unable to stop talking about weather and prices in a way that is actually full of information if you know how to extract it. You stand at his counter for 20 minutes and leave with a clear picture of what the grain elevator in Hoisington is paying per bushel, what Schillinger himself is paying, and what the rail rates from both to Kansas City are, which Schillinger knows from a cousin who works in freight. Outside again, the horse is patient at the post. You untie her and consider. There's a third thing you do in town sometimes, when you have a few minutes and nobody's watching. You go to the general store owned by Mr. and Mrs. Hochstedler, which is not Draper's and has a slightly different inventory, and, more importantly, carries a small selection of popular novels and magazines which Mrs. Hochstedler considers part of her duty to civilization in Ellenwood. You don't buy them because you don't have money for that. But sometimes you stand in the magazine section for 10 minutes and read whatever you can read in 10 minutes, and Mrs. Hochstiedler either doesn't notice or pretends not to, and either way no one says anything. Today you go in. The store smells like cloth and spices and the slightly sweet smell of the penny candy jars on the counter. Two women are looking at fabric near the back. A child is pressed against the candy jars with the expression of someone who understands desire. The magazine stand has 3 copies of Youth's Companion, the November edition of the Ladies' Home Journal, and a Harper's Monthly from September that no one has bought yet. You pick up the Harper's Monthly. On the 3rd page there is an advertisement. Sears, Roebuck and Company, the cheapest supply house on earth. Our trade reaches around the world. Write for our complete illustrated catalogue. The illustration shows the Sears building in Chicago. It is very large. You put the magazine back and go home. Let me tell you about the catalogue, the actual object, because you've been living with it for nearly 2 weeks now, and you know it in the way you know the Bible on the shelf, or the almanac your father keeps on the desk. Not as something you read beginning to end, but as something you return to, open at different points, find things you missed before. The 1897 full catalogue is 786 pages. This is a fact worth sitting with. 786 pages of things you can buy, listed and priced and described in language that is sometimes matter-of-fact and sometimes surprisingly lyrical. Written by people in Chicago who understood that a catalogue is not just a list, but a performance of possibility. Every item has a description, and the descriptions do something specific. They tell you not just what the thing is, but what the thing means. This dress is suitable for church wear. This watch is appropriate for a young man beginning his career. This stove will keep the coldest home warm through the harshest winter. The catalogue knows what you need, and it knows that you need more than the object. You need the story about the object, the version of yourself in which you own the object. Page 127. Ladies and Misses Fine Dress Goods. Silks, cashmeres, woolen fabrics. The prices range from 8 cents per yard for plain cotton lawn to $2.40 per yard for a fine Italian silk that you have no reason to buy but that Margaret spent 45 minutes staring at on a Sunday. Page 203, Men's and Boys' Clothing. Suits, overcoats, work clothes. There is a boy's winter overcoat, heavy wool, brass buttons, in sizes from 8 to 16 years, for $1.48. You have a coat. Your coat is fine. But you look at the picture of the boy in the catalogue coat, standing straight, looking warm and competent and young in the particular way of catalogue illustrations, and something in you understands why Margaret stares at the silk. Page 312. Hardware. This is your father's territory, and you have spent hours in it. Axe handles, hinges, saws. The pump is here. You have memorized its location. Page 341. Right column. Second item from the top. Cast iron. 18-foot lift capacity with a wooden handle grip included in the price painted red. $4.38. Page 445. Furniture. You've never looked at this section seriously. Furniture is what you have. The table, the chairs, the beds. These things don't get replaced. They get repaired, and they will continue to be repaired until they are unrepairable and something else is made or found. But the furniture section in the catalogue is still remarkable as a document of what a house could contain. A parlor organ, suitable for home and church use, for $27.50. You don't have a parlor, you have a kitchen and a back room, but the parlor organ is there, waiting for whenever you do. Page 589. Patent medicines and druggists' sundries. This section is long, very long. Dr. Warden's female pills, Air sarsaparilla, Perry Davis, vegetable painkiller, soothing syrup for infants, porous plasters, liniment for man and beast. Before the catalogue, the nearest druggist was in Great Bend. If you needed medicine, and it was February and your child had a fever, you either drove 20 miles in winter or you didn't go. The catalogue means you can keep a small pharmacy in a kitchen drawer, ordered in September, ready for winter. Page 612. Books and school supplies. Your mother lingered here longest the second night after Margaret was asleep. You pretended to be asleep too, but you watched her through the curtain, turning the pages slowly. There were school books listed, readers, arithmetic texts, a geography with illustrations. She ran her finger down the prices, not making her list this time, just looking. She didn't buy any of the books. The money went to thread and underwear, which are what's needed. But she looked. Evening, 2 weeks after the catalogue arrived. The order has been sent. Your mother's envelope went out the day after you brought back the news from town, and now there's nothing to do but wait. 6 to 8 weeks. It will come before Christmas or just after. Either way it will come. The catalogue is still on the table. It has graduated from a pristine object to a used one. The spine is bent slightly from being opened so many times in both directions. The corner of page 341 is turned down, the pump page, which your father did without commenting on it. The ladies' clothing section has a small, greasy thumbprint on one page from Margaret's fingers after she'd been helping with supper. The catalogue is acquiring a life. Your father is doing accounts tonight. The ledger is open on one half of the table, and the catalogue is on the other half, and he moves between them in a way that isn't quite comparing, but isn't quite not comparing either. He adds a column, closes the ledger, opens the catalogue to the farm tool section, looks at something, closes the catalogue, opens the ledger again. The fire in the stove is down to coals. The room is warm enough, but it will need feeding before bed. You're in the corner with a lamp pulled close, reading the supplement that came with the mail. The Sears supplement is 8 pages, printed on slightly heavier paper than the catalogue itself, and it's full of items that didn't make it into the main catalogue or that arrived after the fall edition was printed. A lot of it is clothing. A lot of it is watches, because Sears started as a watch company, and watches still show up everywhere. On the last page there's a section called Special Rural Offers. This is new. You haven't seen this before. It's addressed explicitly to farming families. It lists items in groups: a cooking kit, a basic set of kitchen tools, a winter clothing package. The prices are lower than the individual catalogue items because they're grouped. The header says, Sears understands the needs of the American farmer. You read this and feel something complicated. Sears understands the needs of the American farmer. Does it? Does a company in Chicago, selling from a warehouse the size of a city block, running advertisements in magazines and mailing catalogues to millions of addresses, does it understand your particular need, which is not just thread and not just underwear, but the whole accumulated weight of years of not quite having enough? And yet, the pump is $4.38, which is less than the $7.50 Draper would charge, which is a real number representing a real difference, which, if your father bought it, would mean an hour less of work every day, for however long a cast iron pump holds up, which is a very long time. Sears doesn't need to understand your life. It just needs to charge a fair price. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's more than enough. Your father closes the ledger. He sits for a moment in the way he does when a decision is making itself, when all the calculating is done, and the only thing left is to say the thing out loud. "James," he says. "Yes, sir." "How much would it cost to have someone put in that pump?" "The installation." You've thought about this. You've thought about it since the first night you saw the pump in the catalogue. Mr. Raines put one in for the Mullers last spring. I think he charged $2 for labour, plus whatever it cost them for the pipe sections. The catalogue sells the pipe sections too. Yes, sir, they're listed on the same page. About 40 cents for the full length you'd need. Your father is quiet. $4.38, he says, plus 40 cents, plus $2 labour. $6.78 total. He doesn't say anything about where $6.78 comes from, because you both know where it comes from, which is somewhere this winter, and it's not obvious where. But he doesn't say no. He closes the catalogue gently with both hands. "In the spring," he says, "if February goes well, which means if the mortgage payment doesn't wipe out everything, which means if the winter is manageable, which means if nothing goes wrong between now and spring, that nothing usually goes wrong but sometimes does." "Yes, sir," you say, and that's all. That's the conversation. You go back to your supplement and he goes to bank the fire for the night, and your mother stops her sewing and folds it into her basket and says good night without ceremony. And Margaret is already asleep on her side of the curtain, and the wind is outside doing what it always does, and the catalogue sits on the table in the last of the lamplight. You should know that you're not the only person lying awake thinking about the catalogue tonight. 3 miles north, the Bowers are looking at their copy of the same edition. They arrived from Germany 6 years ago, Herman and Margareta Bauer, with 2 children and a plan, and the plan has worked out approximately as well as your father's plan, which is to say, not badly, not well, somewhere in the middle of a very hard thing. Their English is good enough. Herman Bauer's English is excellent, actually, because he's stubborn about it. Their catalogue copy is annotated. Margarete has written notes in the margins in German, small words that translate to things like yes, possible, or too expensive, or beautiful. She's on the women's dress section. She has her finger on a wool walking suit, dark navy, in 3 sizes. The price is $2.25. She has $2.35 saved from selling cream at the dairy in Great Bend. She's going to order it. She decided 3 nights ago. She's going to order it and wear it to church, and no one in Ellenwood is going to say a word about it because there's nothing to say. It's a nice suit. It came from the catalogue. Is that a problem? Is it anyone's business? The catalogue has given Margareta Bauer a small private defiance. Herman has his section, ploughs and cultivators. He's been trying to figure out if a catalogue plough would work on his soil, which is slightly different from what the catalogue description seems to be optimised for. He's been asking about it cautiously with other farmers, not wanting to seem like he's planning to stop buying from the local implement dealer, who is a man he has a relationship with and needs to maintain. The catalogue sits between them on their table, with its margins full of German notes and its cover getting worn, telling them both things they needed to know. 2 miles south, the Morrison widow, Agnes Morrison, is also awake. She has 3 children and a farm she's running alone since her husband died of a burst appendix in August, and she has the catalogue open to the medicine section. She's reading the description of something called Peruna, which the catalogue describes as a reliable tonic for catarrh and general weakness, and she's wondering if it would help her youngest, who's been coughing since September with a cough that doesn't want to stop. The catalogue says Peruna is the best-known patent medicine in America, recommended by physicians and ordinary citizens alike. She has $1 saved. She orders the Peruna. She'll order a new hatchet too because hers broke last week. And the piece of her mind devoted to the broken hatchet is a piece she needs back. The catalogue hatchet is 57 cents, which is 43 cents less than Draper's. All over Barton County in sod houses and wood frame farmhouses and the slightly better houses closest to town, people are sitting with the full Sears catalogue and having the same kind of conversation with themselves, doing the same kind of calculation, writing the same kind of careful list on the back of whatever paper is available. The catalogue is a community event, even when it's happening in private. Here is a thing about waiting that you learn completely during the 6 weeks between your mother mailing the order and the day the package comes. Waiting in 1897 is different from waiting now. This isn't modern waiting, where you can check a tracking number online and watch the package move across a map and know it's in a facility in Cincinnati on Tuesday and departed for Detroit on Wednesday. This is waiting in the absolute sense. The letter left on a Thursday. The letter is on a train. The train is in Kansas City, then in Chicago, then in the warehouse somewhere being processed. Your order is being pulled from shelves by someone who doesn't know your name, packed into a box, labelled, loaded onto a different train. The train is going back to Kansas City, to Great Bend, to the post office. At any point in this chain, something could go wrong and you'd have no way of knowing. The item could be out of stock. The money order could have been lost. The package could be damaged. It could be sent to the wrong address, or the address could have been misread, or the rural mail carrier could have made an error, or everything could be fine and it's simply taking 6 weeks, because 6 weeks is how long it takes. You don't know which is happening. What you do know is that every trip to the post office now has a quality it didn't have before. You ask Kettner if there's anything from Chicago, he says no. He says this without impatience, because he said it to 100 people before you and will say it to 100 more, because the whole county is waiting on something from Chicago in the fall. Sometimes he just shakes his head before you finish the question. 3 weeks. 4 weeks. The weather gets harder. One night it drops below 0 and you wake up to find ice in the water basin and a cold that gets through the blankets and finds your bones. You lie there in the dark, listening to the wind and thinking about the pump, and then thinking about something else, which is, it doesn't matter yet. It's not spring. The pump wouldn't be installed until spring anyway. The order coming now is thread and underwear, and neither of those things requires urgency. But you're still waiting. The waiting has its own weight. Margaret asks about it every few days. Has it come? Not yet. When? The catalogue says 6 to 8 weeks. How many is it now? 5. She absorbs this. She goes back to whatever she was doing. Your mother doesn't ask. She's patient in a way that might look like calm, but that you know isn't calm. It's just patience with a lid on it. She knows what she ordered. She knows the prices. She knows the money went out properly on time. She's done her part. Now it's someone else's part. A chain of strangers between here and Chicago, and she's not in a position to hurry them. On a cold Monday at the end of December, you go to the post office and Kettner says, Callaway, finally. He goes into the back room and brings out a box. It's about 14 inches on a side, brown paper wrapped and tied with twine, addressed to Mrs. A.E. Callaway in care of the Ellenwood Post Office. The return address is Chicago. The box is heavier than you expected. You carry it out to the wagon and put it on the bench seat beside you and don't open it, because that's your mother's right, and ride home. The opening of a Sears package in your kitchen on a cold December evening with the kerosene lamp turned up and the stove burning hot is not a dramatic event in the way that, say, a hanging is a dramatic event or a flood or a fire. It's a quiet event. It's a small event. But it's real in a way that matters. Your mother cuts the twine with her sewing scissors, which is the right tool for this. She folds back the brown paper carefully, because the paper can be used again, for wrapping, for patterns, for starting the fire on a particularly cold morning. Inside the brown paper, everything is wrapped in tissue, each item separately. The tissue is thin and rustles when you touch it. The thread first. 3 spools, each one in its own small wrap, in the colours your mother ordered, white, dark brown, and a blue-grey that she needs for a specific piece of mending that has been sitting in her basket for 3 weeks waiting for the right thread. She unrolls the blue-grey spool and holds it up to the lamp and nods, satisfied, in the way of someone who specified exactly what she wanted and received exactly that. The darning needles come in a small paper envelope with the Sears name printed on the front. She opens it and counts them. 8, she says, same as the catalogue. Then the underwear. 3 pieces, 2 for Margaret and 1 for you, folded flat and tight in more tissue paper. Margaret is right there by her mother's elbow, and when her 2 pieces come out, she reaches for them and holds them up, looking at the fabric, which is heavy cotton, knit with a soft inner surface. She puts her cheek against it. It's soft, she says. It's the right grade, your mother says, same as what the Hochstiedler girls wear. She knows this because she's felt the Hochstiedler girls' clothing at church with the kind of subtle, practical attention that women pay to fabric as a professional matter. Your piece is larger. You hold it without looking at it, feeling the weight, the warmth of the fabric even before it's worn. Your mother refolds everything neatly back into the tissue. She puts the threads in her sewing basket. She puts the needles on the shelf above it. She takes the underwear to the back room. Your father has been watching all of this from his chair. He says nothing. After your mother comes back from the back room, he says, "Good quality." "Very good quality," your mother says. "Better than what Hochstedler's carries, I think. About the same as the great Ben shop." He nods, and that's it. The order has arrived. The system has worked. The thread will be used. The needles will be used. The underwear will be worn through a winter that has teeth. Somewhere in Chicago, a transaction record shows that account number however many, rural route, Barton County, Kansas, has received their fall order, and it was handled without incident. 6 to 8 weeks. Your mother does the math quietly in her head. She sent the order 42 days ago. 6 weeks even. There is a man in Ellinwood named Walt Graves who is more or less the town's opinion in the way that small towns always have one person who functions as a general arbiter of how things stand. He's not the mayor. He's not a preacher or a teacher. He runs the barber shop, which means he sees every man in town who needs a haircut, and that's every man in town. And he talks while he cuts, and he listens while other men talk, and he has a well-developed sense of where things are going. Walt Graves thinks the Sears catalogue is a problem. He says so, regularly, in the barber shop, in the tone of a man who has thought about something carefully and reached a position and sees no reason to moderate it. He says, the catalogue is taking money out of the community. He says, when you buy thread from Sears, you're taking money from Mrs. Hochstedler's store and sending it to Chicago, which means less business for Hochstedler's, which means less money for Mrs. Hochstedler, which means she buys less from the suppliers in town, which means less business for everyone, which means less money in every pocket in Barton County. He draws this chain out clearly and completely. He's not wrong about the logic. He also says, Draper's going to raise his prices if his business falls off, not lower them. Because that's what happens. You think you're saving money by using the catalogue, but what you're really doing is destroying the competition that keeps Draper honest. And when Draper has no competition, where are you then? He has a point about this too. What Walt Graves never says, because he's not the kind of man who says the inconvenient parts, Draper's prices are already high. The catalogue came into existence because of the prices. The farmers started using the catalogue because the merchants were charging what they could get away with, and the catalogue was the first thing that gave people an alternative. You can't make the argument that everyone should shop local in good faith when shopping local has been, for a generation, the only option, and the prices reflect it. But Walt Graves doesn't say that. He says community. He says loyalty. He says, we take care of each other here. And people nod, because they agree with the parts that are true, and the parts that aren't true are more complicated to argue against at 8 in the morning when you're getting a haircut. Your father has had this conversation. He has nodded in the barber shop with everyone else. He has, several times, bought things at Draper's that were more expensive than they needed to be, because of the relationship and the credit and the complicated arithmetic of being someone Draper could decide not to help in February. Your father is a careful man, but he has the catalogue open to page 341 with the corner turned down. The winter is hard this year. Not catastrophically hard. Not in the way of the worst winters that people in this part of Kansas still talk about. The blizzard of 1886, when the snow came so fast and so thick that people got lost between their house and their barn, lost on their own property, and died 30 feet from their front door. Nothing like that, but hard in the normal way of Kansas winters. Long cold spells, temperatures that stay below freezing for weeks at a stretch, wind that takes the temperature lower than the thermometer shows, and makes every trip outside a calculation of how long you can stand it. You develop a routine for the cold. 2 pairs of socks, always. An extra layer in the morning before chores. You learn which parts of the house are warmest at which times of day, because the stove is the only heat source, and the walls of a sod house, for all their thickness, are not perfectly sealed, and there are cold zones near the windows and warm zones close to the stove, and you arrange your day around this geography. Your mother sews in the warmest corner, your sister does her schoolwork near the stove. Your father and you are outside for the first 2 hours of the morning, and then inside and outside in alternation all day, coming in to warm your hands over the stove before going back out. The well is the worst. The well in winter is never truly frozen because it's deep enough that the ground temperature down there stays above freezing, but the rope gets ice on it in very cold weather, and the bucket's handle is agony on bare hands, which is why you wear gloves, but the gloves get wet, and the wet cold is worse than the dry cold in ways that are hard to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. You think about the pump. You think about it specifically every morning, every single morning, from November through March, during the part of the morning routine that involves the well. You think about it the way you think about spring, the way you think about warmth. It becomes a kind of promise. Not a promise from anyone, not something anyone has committed to, just a shape in the future that has become real by being thought about enough. $4.38 plus 40 cents plus $2, labor equals $6.78. You do this math in your head while you're cranking the bucket. January brings something else, which is the letter from the bank. You know what's in it before your father opens it, not because you can read the bank's letterhead, though you can, but because February is when the mortgage is due, and January is when the bank reminds you that February is when the mortgage is due. The letter is polite. It's always polite. The bank is a polite institution. It says, in the formal language of a business that wants you to understand that business is business and this is not personal, that the annual payment is due on the 15th of February, and that the Callaways have been valued customers of the bank, and the bank looks forward to continued relationship and so forth. Your father reads it at the table, folds it, puts it in the inside pocket of his coat. He doesn't say anything. But that evening, when he does the accounts in his ledger, he adds up columns twice, and when he closes the ledger, he closes it slowly. The mortgage payment is $48. This is the result of what your father borrowed to buy the land, at a rate that seemed reasonable in Ohio and became less reasonable in Kansas when the crops ran thin. He's been paying it for 4 years. He'll be paying it for 16 more if nothing changes, and after 20 years the land is his and no one can take it. But that's 20 years and this is year 4 and $48 is what February requires. After the harvest, after selling the wheat and settling with the grain elevator and paying the most pressing debts to Draper and to Schillinger, your father had $53 and some cents in the bank. The mortgage takes 48 of it. What's left is $5 and some cents, and that has to get them through to spring planting and the next round of expenses, and it's tight. It's very tight. $6.78 for the pump. In the spring, your father said, if February goes well, February has gone as well as it can. The $48 is there, but $6.78 is now a conversation about what's possible, not about what's wanted, and possible is smaller than wanted. There is something that happens in late January that changes the texture of the winter and that I want to tell you about, because it has nothing to do with the catalogue and everything to do with what the catalogue means. The Hoffman farm 2 miles east of town goes to auction. Friedrich Hoffman has been farming in Barton County for 11 years. He came from Pennsylvania, like your family, though different parts. He's not a bad farmer and has not been unlucky in any specific dramatic way. He has been unlucky in the accumulated way, which is the more common kind, the way where each individual bad thing is survivable but the accumulation of them is not. A bad year here, a broken piece of machinery there, a child's illness that cost money, a hailstorm that took 15% of the wheat crop, a winter where the cow died and the replacement cost more than expected. Nothing you could point to. Everything together. The bank is calling in the mortgage. You hear this from your father, who hears it from Schillinger, who hears it from the postmaster, who hears it from the banker himself, who made the mistake of mentioning it in the barber shop while getting a haircut, which means Walt Graves knows, and once Walt Graves knows, the county knows by Tuesday. The auction is on a Thursday in late January. Cold but clear, the kind of day that looks like it should be warmer than it is, the sun bright on the snow and the sky a hard, brilliant blue. Your father says you're going. You've never been to a farm auction before. You've heard about them. In the way that children who grow up in farm country hear about the bad things, at the edges of adult conversations, the lowered voices, the names mentioned with a particular gravity. The Jacobson place, the Kruger sale, names that meant something bad happened, that the farm went away, that a family had to start over or give up or do something other than what they had planned. The Hoffman auction. Okay, let me keep writing. I'm at roughly 9,000 words here. I'm going to push through to tell this story. You and your father ride out in the wagon. The road is frozen hard this morning, and the wheels rattle over the surface without sinking, which is the good version of winter roads. The bad version is the thaw when you sink. On a frozen road you make good time, and your father sits beside you without talking, his breath making small clouds in the cold air, his hands in his lap with the reins loose between them. The horse knows the road to the Hoffman place because your father and Friedrich Hoffman have occasionally traded labour, especially at harvest, the way neighbours do when the work is bigger than one family. When you come in sight of the Hoffman farmstead, you see the wagons, a dozen, maybe 15, arranged haphazardly along the fence line, horses standing patiently. More people than you've ever seen at the Hoffman place. More people than you see at church on a regular Sunday. You recognise some of the wagons. The Bowers are here, Herman and Margareta both. The Morrison widow is here, which surprises you, because the road from the Morrison place is longer, and she doesn't have a man to drive. She drove herself. The auction is set up in the farmyard. A man from the bank is there, a different man from the bank than the one who works at the window, this one with a townsman's coat looking too thin for the weather and papers in his hand, and a professional auctioneer brought in from Great Bend, a heavy-set man with a loud voice who has clearly done this before. The Hoffman family is there, Friedrich and his wife and their 4 children standing near the barn. Friedrich is a big man, broad shoulders, sandy hair going grey. He's standing with his arms at his sides in a particular way, with a particular expression, which is the expression of a man who's decided not to show anything and is working at it. His wife is not working at it. She's looking at the yard with an expression that has no performance in it at all. Their oldest child is about your age, a girl named Anna, whom you've seen at church and never talked to. She's standing slightly apart from her family with her arms crossed, looking at the auction crowd with a face you can read, the look of someone who is being humiliated in public and knows it, and is trying to decide whether to feel it or to get through it. You look away from her. The auctioneer starts. He starts with the small things, the way auctions do. The kitchen items first, the heavy iron kettle, a good one, 15 years old. He holds it up. Bidding starts. You watch. There are men in the crowd who are there to buy. Practical men, neighbours who need equipment and see this as an opportunity. And there are men in the crowd who are there for something else. You see one of them catch the eye of another. A small nod. The iron kettle goes to a bid of 15 cents. 15 cents for an iron kettle that cost $2 new. The auctioneer looks at his papers but doesn't comment. The next item is a set of cast iron cookware, 3 pieces. The bidding starts at a dime. It ends at 22 cents. You understand what's happening about 4 items in. The men who are there to buy, who are legitimate buyers wanting equipment at good prices, they're not bidding. They're standing with their arms crossed watching. And the only bids coming in are the low bids, the absurd bids, the bids that are more like a statement than an offer. This is something that farmers do sometimes at auctions like this, a form of collective protection. If you bid things up to fair prices, the bank gets close to market value and the family gets almost nothing. If you keep the bids to pennies, the bank gets almost nothing. The sale satisfies the legal requirement, and afterward, the same men who kept the bids low return the purchased items to the family for the same pennies they paid. It's illegal, technically. It's also the only thing some communities have against the banks. But it requires everyone to agree to it. And it requires the bankman and the auctioneer to either not know about it or to decide not to make trouble about it. And the bankman and the auctioneer are from Great Bend and it's very cold and they'd like to get this done. The iron kettle goes back to Mrs. Hoffman after the auction for 15 cents. The cast iron cookware goes back for 22 cents. The plough goes for $1.08 to Hermann Bauer, who will keep it, because Friedrich Hoffmann can use his family's labour for spring planting on whatever land he finds to work. But a plough is specific, and Friedrich will need to be on someone's farm with someone's plough, not his own. Hermann Bauer needs the plough. He pays fairly for it, which in this context means the lowest bid that doesn't look like mockery. The land itself, the house and the barn and the 80 acres, this is where the bank man has been patient. This is what the bank actually wants. The bidding is different here. The penny bidding men step back. This is the bank's rightful claim, the legal instrument, the collateral against the loan. No one in the crowd is going to mock the bank on the land itself. They might get away with it on the kettles, but not here. The land goes to the bank for the remaining balance on the mortgage. Friedrich Hoffmann watches his land sold and says nothing. His wife has turned away. Anna has not turned away. She's watching with the same expression, worked hard, held steady. Your father is next to you, very still. You ride home mostly in silence. Halfway he says, Friedrich will work a neighbour's farm for shares this spring. Schillinger already offered. He's a hard worker. He'll be all right. It sounds like something you say when you're telling yourself something at least as much as you're telling someone else. Yes, sir, you say. The horse's hooves rattle on the frozen road. You think about February. February goes well, which means the $48 is there and goes to the bank and comes back as a receipt that your father puts in the tin box where important papers go, and the tin box goes back under the floorboards, and nothing happens in February that makes things worse than they were. On a Saturday near the end of February, your father comes in from the barn and sits down at the kitchen table with his coat still on, and looks at the catalogue, which is still there, and says, "Write down the order for the pump." Your mother looks up from her sewing. "The pump and the pipe sections," he says. "The amounts are on page 341. You get the catalogue. You find the page. You write down the numbers in the order form, your handwriting careful because the numbers have to be right. The pump, the pipe sections, $4.38, 40 cents. I'll ask Raines on Sunday what he wants for the installation. $2, you say? He told me in December. Your father looks at you. You talked to Raines about it, about the cost, when I was in town. A pause. He might say something about having the conversation before the decision was made. He doesn't. He says, "Write it up." You write the order form. Your mother puts in the money order from the household tin, the money she has from the egg sales over the winter, which she's been keeping aside since November. The order goes out on Monday. 6 weeks is a long time when you know exactly what's coming. The weeks of March pass in the way of late winter on the plains, which is to say, barely. The days get longer, but the cold doesn't relent as fast as the longer days suggest it should. There's a thaw in early March that turns the farmyard to mud, and then a freeze that locks the mud into ruts, which is the worst of both conditions. All the inconvenience of mud and all the hardness of frozen ground combined. You check the post office on your regular trips to town. Kettner's expression tells you before he says anything. Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Then, on a cold Wednesday in late March, Kettner carries out a box that is heavier than the last one, noticeably heavier, and your arms feel it when you take it from the counter. The paper is brown and the twine is thick and the Chicago postmark is clean. You put it in the wagon with the same care you'd use for an egg. At home, your father opens it. The pump is inside, disassembled, packed in straw. The pieces are cast iron, dark grey, Smooth where they need to be smooth and rough where roughness serves a function. The handle is wooden, turned on a lathe with a good solid grip. The pipe sections are wrapped separately in more straw. All of it arrived intact. Your father turns the pump handle in his hands. He runs his thumb along the joint where the handle meets the mechanism. Good metal, he says. He's not the kind of man who gives compliments easily. A compliment to a pump means something. Mr. Rains comes on a Saturday in early April. He's a thin, practical man, a general labourer and handyman who has worked on most of the farms in the county at one point or another, who can fix most things and knows when something needs a specialist, and who can be trusted to do the work he says he'll do in the time he says he'll do it. He looks at the pump, he looks at the well casing, he measures. Straightforward job, he says, should be done before noon. He's done by 10:30. He removes the old casing cover, extends the well pipe with the sections from Sears, attaches the pump base to the new stone platform he set over the casing, connects the pipe through the base, primes it. He works the handle 3 times. Water comes up, not dramatically, not with any great sound. It comes up the way water does, filling the pump body, emerging at the spout in a steady clear stream that falls into the bucket you've placed beneath it. You stand there watching water come out of a pump. Your mother is behind you. You hear her exhale, which is a sound you don't have words for. Not satisfaction exactly. Something longer than satisfaction. Margaret pushes forward and works the handle herself. Water comes out. She works it again. More water. She looks up at you with an expression that is entirely uncomplicated, which is delight. Your father pays Mr. Rains the $2. They shake hands. After Rains leaves, your father works the pump handle himself, slowly, watching the water. He fills the big bucket. He lifts the bucket and carries it to the barn without looking back. Here is what the pump means in practice. Over the following weeks and months, it means 45 minutes of your morning back. Not in a big way. Not all at once. You don't suddenly have 45 minutes free every morning. The work fills the time. It always does. But the water chores go from being the worst part of the morning to being simply a part of the morning. The pump handle is stiff at first before it warms up in spring air, but it's manageable. Your hands don't hurt from the rope anymore. Your shoulders don't ache from the bucket. The ice problem, the rope icing in hard cold, is gone entirely because the pump handle is iron and doesn't ice up the way rope does. Your mother fills the kitchen barrel in 3 minutes instead of 30. She notices this. She doesn't say so, but you can see it in the way she moves in the morning, slightly less arranged against the work, slightly more able to begin the next thing. The pump is a real thing, in the physical world, in your actual morning, in your actual body. It is $4.38 plus 40 cents, and it has changed something that costs no words to explain. It just changed it. Spring arrives in the way it arrives on the Kansas plains, which is to argue with winter for 3 weeks, and then win all at once. One morning the fields are still half frozen, brown and grey and beaten down by winter, and then the wind shifts and the smell changes, and a week later the green is coming up from the dirt in a way that looks like it's been waiting and couldn't be stopped. Your father is planting. That's the spring rhythm, preparation, planting, waiting, the wheat goes in, the kitchen garden goes in, the corn later when the ground is warm enough, the whole farm oriented around the question of what will grow and what the weather will do. You're old enough now that you work alongside your father as more than a helper. You're doing the work yourself, not just assisting. He directs and you do, and sometimes he watches and corrects. projects, and sometimes he trusts you to do a thing and go on to the next thing without watching at all. On a warm April afternoon, you're ploughing the far field. The horse moves steadily, the plough cutting, you walking behind it with your hands on the handles, and the smell of turned earth is the particular smell of spring that doesn't smell like anything else, clean and dark and faintly sweet. This smell of what's underneath the surface coming up into the air. You plough in long rows, and at the end of each row you turn the horse and start back, and as you turn, for a few seconds, you can see the whole farm from here. The sod house, the barn, the chicken yard, the kitchen garden plot your mother has staked out, the new pump over the well, visible from here as a small dark shape with a pump handle rising above the casing. It is not a beautiful farm. It is a working farm. It is exactly what it is. A piece of Kansas land being made productive by people who don't have much and are doing what they can with it. But it's yours. It's your family's. The mortgage is on it and the bank has a claim and the claim is real. But so is the land, so is the house. So is the work that's gone into 4 years of making it function. You turn the horse and start the next row. Summer comes. The wheat comes in better than last year. Not good, not the yield your father had planned for, but better. He stands in the field in July running the heads of wheat through his fingers with the expression of a man doing mathematics, and the mathematics, for once, is coming up on the right side. Better, he says. Better than last year. Better than the last 2 years. He looks at the field. It is a flat, long field, the wheat standing gold in the July heat, the sky above it enormous and white with sun. The Kansas sky in summer is not a comfortable sky. It's too big. It presses down on the flat land in a way that makes you feel how small the human scale is against it. Your father is not intimidated by the sky. He's been working under it for 4 years. We'll have a decent haul, he says. Not enough to get ahead, but enough. This is a good thing to say. This means the February calculation will be cleaner. This means the space between what comes in and what goes out might have, for the first time, a small margin. A small margin is what security looks like on a farm in 1897. The full catalogue arrives in September. You're ready for it in a different way than you were last year. Last year the catalogue was magic, was the wish book, was 786 pages of everything you didn't have and might imagine. This year you know it better. You know which sections are honest and which ones push the description slightly past what the product delivers. You know from the pump that the quality is genuinely good on the hardware items. You know from your mother's thread and needles that the basics are exactly what they say they are. The catalogue is not magic. The catalogue is a tool. A very good tool, one that happens to also be something you can dream over, but a tool. Your mother makes her list in September. As before, it's a longer list this year. A list with slightly more confidence in it. Because the harvest was better, and the February calculation is different. Your father sits down one evening and goes through the hardware section with a pencil, marking things. He marks the pump, which you already have. He marks it anyway, maybe to remind himself that it was possible, that the catalogue delivered what it promised. He marks a cultivator attachment that would change how long the spring cultivation takes. He marks a new saw. He marks a coil of wire fencing. He doesn't order all of it. He orders the wire fencing and leaves the rest for next year. But the marking is itself something. The relationship with the catalogue has changed from wishful to strategic. He's not looking at it to dream. He's looking at it to plan. At the end of summer, something happens that I want to tell you about because it belongs to this story, because it explains what the catalogue is and isn't, and what it means to people who have nothing and are given something that costs money. Anna Hoffman comes to work for your family for 2 weeks in August to help with the harvest and the kitchen work when the work is heaviest. Her family is in different circumstances now, living on a farm near Hoisington that belongs to someone else, working for shares, the kind of arrangement that keeps you alive but doesn't build toward anything. Her father has plans. He's working toward the plans. But this August, Anna can hire herself out for the harvest and bring money back to the family, and your father pays fair wages, and so here she is. She sleeps in the back room where Margaret sleeps, on a pallet your mother laid out with extra blankets. She works hard and efficiently and without complaint, which is not surprising given what you know about her family. She and your mother work well together in the kitchen, a shorthand that women who both work hard seem to find quickly. One evening after supper, you're all sitting in the kitchen and your father has gone out to check on something and Margaret has gone to bed, and Anna is at the table mending a piece of her own clothing, and your mother is sewing, and you're reading the almanac, and the full catalogue is there on the table because it arrived the week before. Anna glances at the catalogue. "You have the new full one," she says. "It came last week," your mother says. Anna reaches across and touches the cover, just with one finger, then pulls her hand back. "We had ours last winter," she says, "before. Before the auction. Before the farm went to the bank." "My mother used to read it," Anna says. She says it in a flat voice, the voice of someone saying a fact. She had a list of things she was going to order someday, when things were better. Your mother looks up from her sewing. She looks at Anna for a moment. "What was on it?" your mother asks, not in a prying way. In the way of asking because she wants to know. Anna is quiet for a moment. "A parlor organ," she says. "My mother played when she was young before she married. She always said she'd have one again someday." The parlor organ. Page 445 of the catalogue. $27.50. Your mother is quiet for a moment. "She will," your mother says. Anna looks at her. "You don't know that." "No," your mother says. "I don't. But I know your father is a hard worker and your family's going to be all right, and someday better is going to mean something specific, and your mother is going to have a list ready." Anna looks at the catalogue on the table, then looks back at her mending. "I hope so," she says. She goes back to her work. Your mother goes back to hers. Outside the August night is warm and the wind is lighter than usual, and somewhere far off there's a coyote doing what coyotes do at night. That ascending call that starts like a question and ends like a statement. You turn the almanac page and don't say anything, but you look at the catalogue. $27.50 for a parlor organ. And you think, maybe, someday, maybe. Let me tell you something about what the Sears catalogue actually meant for the country, because you're living inside it, but you can't see all of it from where you stand, and I want to give you the view from higher up. In 1897, when you're living this story, about 60% of Americans live in rural areas, not in cities, not in towns, on farms, in small settlements, in places where the nearest meaningful store is half a day away. These are the people who depend on the general store and its credit system. These are the people for whom getting a specific size of bolt or a specific weight of thread requires an expedition, a relationship, and an acceptance of whatever price the local merchant decides to charge. These people have been paying the rural premium for their entire lives. The rural premium is the extra cost of living far from supply chains, far from competition, far from the aggregation effects that make city prices lower. A city family can shop at 5 stores in an afternoon, comparing prices, creating competition that keeps each store honest. A farm family shops at one store once every week or two, and the store knows it. The Sears catalogue breaks this. Not completely, not all at once, and with real costs, as Walt Graves in The Barbershop correctly identifies. But it breaks it. Richard Sears was not a philanthropist. He was not trying to save rural America from predatory pricing. He was a businessman who saw an enormous market that wasn't being served efficiently and moved to serve it. He started with watches in 1886 because watches were small, could be shipped cheaply, and had extremely high markup at the retail level. He bought watches from manufacturers at cost and sold them by mail at prices far below what jewellery stores charged, and it worked, and he expanded. By 1893, the catalogue was a general catalogue covering hundreds of categories. By 1897, when you're holding it, it has 786 pages, and millions of copies are mailed out every year. By 1902, the Sears catalogue will be over 1,000 pages. By 1908, Sears will be selling complete house kits, entire homes, every nail and board and door pre-cut and numbered, shipped by rail, assembled by the buyer. 90,000 Sears kit houses will be built between 1908 and 1940, and some of them are still standing. But that's later. Right now, in 1897, the catalogue is thread and hardware and patent medicine and underwear. It's your mother's list, it's your pump. And across the country, on hundreds of thousands of farm kitchen tables, it's the wish book. The fall edition and the spring edition, each one arriving like a visitor from a different world, staying until the next one comes, getting soft and worn at the corners from handling, its pages marked and folded and read until the pages themselves soften. Old catalogue pages, when the new one arrives, become many things. Patterns for sewing, pages for the children to practice writing on, insulation stuffed into the gaps in walls, and the most famous one, the outhouse. The outhouse in a rural home in this era does not have manufactured paper. It has what's available. Old newspaper, old catalogue pages. The catalogue serves you until it's completely used up, right to the last page. Sears knew this. Sears printed on soft, thin paper specifically because soft, thin paper tears better for this purpose. I am not making this up. October. The fall is coming in the way of Kansas falls, which are often beautiful in a severe way. Hard blue skies, the remaining green going gold and brown, the air dry and smelling of harvest. The temperature dropping fast at night but warming pleasantly in the afternoon. You walk to the grain elevator with your father on a clear October morning, and the light is at the angle that makes long shadows and makes everything look slightly more solid than usual, the way fall light does. The grain elevator in Great Bend is a building that dominates the town the way a cathedral might dominate a European village. Not for beauty, but for function and scale. It rises above everything else, a great wooden tower for storing grain, breathing slightly with the weight of what it holds. The smell near the elevator is of grain dust and dry wood and something faintly sweet. The concentrated smell of harvested wheat. You climb the outside ladder on the side of the building, which the elevator operator lets you do because you've asked twice before, and he finally said yes, probably to stop being asked. The ladder is vertical iron rungs set into the wood, not entirely comfortable, requiring you to grip and step carefully. You go up 40 feet. From the top you can see the plains. That's what you can see. The plains in every direction, flat and enormous, the far distance blurring into a haze where the earth meets the sky. The town of Great Bend below you, which from this angle reveals itself as a pattern, the grid of streets, the buildings clustered on the main street, the scattered houses and lots beyond, the rail line running through town, its two silver lines converging as they go east. Farms in the distance, visible as patterns of ploughed and planted fields, brown and gold and the occasional grey-green of a winter pasture. 8 miles south, roughly, is Ellenwood. You can't see it. It's too far and the plains are too flat and the haze is too thick. But you know it's there, and you know that somewhere in that direction is your farm, the sod house, the barn, the pump over the well that you can't see from here, but know is there. You think about what you're looking at. It doesn't look like poverty from up here. It looks like a working landscape, productive, human. The farms are not beautiful in the way of paintings, but they're real in the way of things that exist because people made them exist. Every field down there is a person's work. Every road is a path someone needed. Every building is a decision and a resource and a hope. The catalogue ships to all of this, to every farm you can see, and everyone beyond what you can see, all the way out to the edge of what's possible. Twice a year, the same book, the same prices, the same items, available to the woman in Kansas, and the man in Nebraska, and the family in Minnesota, and the family in Georgia, all of them writing their order forms at their kitchen tables, all of them sending money to Chicago, all of them waiting. You think about Anna Hoffman's mother and the parlor organ that is on the catalogue page waiting. You think about your mother's list in September, longer this year than last. You think about your father's marks in pencil on the hardware pages planning for next spring. And you think, this is what change looks like, not dramatic, not all at once, not anyone riding in to fix anything, just this year, the order is a little longer than last year. This year, the thing that was possible last year is actual. This year the list has one more item on it than the year before, and next year it will have one more than that. That's progress in this country, in this era. That's what it looks like from the ground. From up here on the elevator, it looks like fields, brown and gold, and the distant silver of the rail line carrying everything everywhere. The elevator operator hollers up that he's locking the ladder. You climb back down, November again, 1 year from when the catalogue first arrived. The catalogue is different now. You have 2 of them, actually. The Fall 97, worn and soft and missing several pages that were used for various purposes over the year, and the Fall 98, which arrived in September and is still new enough that the pages haven't softened yet, and the spine still has some resistance. Your mother has moved her list from brown paper to a small notebook she ordered from the catalogue in March. It cost 15 cents. She keeps it in her sewing basket and adds to it as things come to her, and some items move from the list to orders, and some items stay on the list through season after season, waiting for when possible catches up with wanted. Margaret is 13 now. She has moved through 3 sections of the catalogue as her primary interest. Toys, she was too old but looked anyway. Clothing, she's been here for a year. And now, with a practicality that surprises you slightly, the kitchen section. She's looking at things your mother uses or might use, making note of prices, absorbing information about the cost of things. She has an eye for value that she didn't get from nowhere. Your father ordered the wire fencing last spring, and it arrived and is in the ground now along the east border of the property, which means the east border is tight and the animals stay where they're supposed to stay, and a week of fence-related problems has been eliminated from his life. He has a new list started for the spring catalogue. The cultivator attachment is on it. So is a new set of harness fittings. And this year, near the bottom of the list in your father's careful handwriting, something you didn't put there. Parlor organ. See page 445. Price? You look at this for a long moment. You're not sure when he wrote it. You're not sure what it means exactly, whether it's a serious notation or a hopeful one, or just an acknowledgement that a thing exists and is possible. Your father doesn't play music. Your mother doesn't play music. Margaret has shown no particular musical interest, but it's there. You asked your mother about it once sideways, not mentioning the catalogue entry. You said something about whether she had ever played music, whether she'd wanted to. She was quiet for a moment. My mother had a small piano, she said, in Pennsylvania. My grandmother had it before her. What happened to it? We couldn't bring it west. No room on the wagon. She left it with my aunt in Pittsburgh. She went back to what she was doing. Your father's notation on page 445. $27.50. Maybe next year. Maybe the year after. Maybe when better means something specific enough to put a number to it. The catalogue is still on the table. Here is what the catalogue cannot do, which is important to say. The catalogue cannot fix the price of wheat. The price of wheat is set in Chicago at the Board of Trade by men trading contracts in a room you've never seen, responding to supply from Argentina and Australia and Russia and the American plains all together, responding to demand in Britain and Germany and France, responding to 1,000 factors that have nothing to do with your field or your soil or your work. When the price of wheat drops, as it did in 1893 and 1896 and will again in 1900, the catalogue can give you a pump for $4.38 instead of $7.50, but it cannot make the wheat worth what you need it to be worth. The catalogue cannot fix the interest rate on your father's mortgage. The rate was set in 1893 when he borrowed the money, and it stays what it is. The catalogue can sell you a new plough more cheaply than the local implement dealer, but it cannot change what it costs to borrow money in this country, which is set by banks in cities responding to their own calculations, multiplied across everything you buy from it. Over years, it adds up to something. Not salvation, not security, but something real. And it can give you twice a year 786 pages of everything you might want to have, everything that exists in the world that can be purchased and shipped, the complete inventory of what's possible, delivered to your door. And when you have nothing, when the fields are thin and the mortgage is heavy and the February calculation is tight, having something to dream over cost nothing. The catalogue was free. Evening in November, the sod house, the stove going, the lamp on the table. Your mother is at her list. The new fall edition open beside her, her small notebook open on the other side. She makes a mark, considers, makes another. Her pen moves in the careful, careful way. Margaret is in her corner, the catalogue open to a page you can't see from here. She's been sitting there for an hour, reading in the absorbed way of someone who is somewhere else entirely, in the illustrated world of the catalogue, which is a better lit world than this room. A world where everything is new and the fabric hangs properly and the women have good shoes and the men's coats are clean. Your father's out in the barn. He'll be in before long, stamping his boots at the door, hanging his coat on the hook, washing his hands in the cold water from the pitcher. He'll sit at the table and look at the ledger and then, probably, look at the catalogue. He'll have coffee. He'll say something eventually in the careful voice about what the spring is going to need. Outside the wind. Always the wind. You're at the table with nothing particular in front of you except the catalogue open to page 341. The pump page. You have the pump. The pump works. You don't need to look at this page. But you're looking at it anyway, at the illustration of the pump that looks like your pump, the cast iron and the red painted handle, and the woman standing beside it with the expression that seemed impossible last year, and now seems like exactly the right expression. Because it is actually what it feels like to have water come out of a pump without carrying a bucket. You turn to page 445. The parlour organ is there. It has been there for years in this catalogue and everyone before it, waiting with the patience of an inanimate object for someone to send in the money order. $27.50. You think about it honestly. $27.50 is not possible this year. It may not be possible next year. But it's possible in the way that things become possible, when the accumulation of small years adds up to something larger, when better gets better year by year, when the list gets one item shorter each fall. Maybe your mother will have it in 3 years, maybe 5, maybe it will be Margaret who has it, in her own house when she's grown and married and living somewhere with a parlour to put it in. Maybe it will stay on the list forever, the thing that's always almost possible, the horizon that stays just ahead. The catalogue doesn't promise you'll get there, it just shows you the way. The night comes down over the Kansas plains the way it always does. Gradually, the light going from gold to orange to a long grey blue, and then to dark. The dark coming from the east and filling up the sky from that direction first, the west holding its colour longest, a pale thin line of orange at the horizon that lasts longer than seems reasonable and then is gone. The kerosene lamp is the whole room. Everything beyond its circle is dark. Margaret has put the catalogue away and is asleep behind her curtain, her breathing slow and even, the breathing of someone who is deeply, completely gone into sleep the way young people can go. Your mother has put her list away in the sewing basket. She's in the back room. Your father came in from the barn, washed his hands, said good night, and went to bed with the efficiency of a man who does not waste time that could be sleep. You sit at the table alone. The catalogue is open to page 341. Or maybe you've turned it back to 445. Or maybe it's open somewhere else entirely, somewhere in the hundreds of pages between what you have and what might be possible, between the pump you ordered and the pump you received, and the thing that comes next. The stove needs banking. You get up, add the last piece of wood, adjust the damper. The fire settles into coals that will hold until morning. Back at the table, the lamp, the catalogue, the sound of the wind, which is always there, which you stopped hearing the way you stopped hearing your own heartbeat, which is just the sound of being alive in this place. You're not the boy who stepped off the train in Ohio and crossed the flat brown plains toward a farm he hadn't seen yet. You're not completely that boy anymore. You're also not whatever you'll be in 10 years, when the farm is more established and the debt is lighter and the list is shorter and, more than you know now. You're in between. You're in the middle of becoming something. That's all right. That's where things happen. Right here in the middle of it, you blow out the lamp. The dark comes in from the edges of the room. Not total dark. There's the faint orange glow from the stove damper. Enough to see the shapes. Enough to find the stairs, the bed, the blanket pulled up. Outside, the November wind. Inside, the cooling tick of the stove. Somewhere in the dark, the pump over the well. Cast iron, red handle, $4.38, working. Somewhere in Chicago, the Sears warehouse enormous and lit and organized, holding everything, waiting for the next order, the next letter, the next item on the next list on the next kitchen table, in the next county in the next state. The catalogue is on the table. It will be there in the morning. Sleep comes the way it does after a full day of working, not all at once, not in a dramatic way. It comes in the way of something you stop fighting, something that was always going to happen and was only a matter of time. The sounds of the house change. The wind outside sounds different when you're most of the way asleep, softer, less specific. The stove ticks less frequently. The cold of November is outside. You are inside. You're warm enough, you're fed enough, you're safe enough. You have a pump over the well that works. You have a list for spring. You have a catalogue on the table that will be there in the morning. 786 pages of everything that exists and is possible, waiting with the patience of a very good tool that knows it has more work to do. Tomorrow will be the same as today in most ways. The morning chores, the water from the pump, the cold that gets warmer by noon, the work that fills the hours with the specific texture of working land in the specific season of winter, on the specific patch of Kansas that is yours and your family's and not the bank's yet, though the bank has a claim, though the claim is real. Tomorrow there will be the catalogue and the list and the calculation of what possible looks like this year versus last year. But that's tomorrow. Right now there's just this. The dark room, the warm blanket, the wind outside doing its ancient and endless work. The sound of your sister's breathing through the curtain, steady and slow. The catalogue is already in the fall season, but you know the spring one is coming. March probably. It will arrive at the post office in Great Bend and travel by mail carrier to Ellenwood and sit in Kettner's back room until you come in with the letter in your pocket. And Kettner says, "Calloway, got something for you." And you'll carry it home and put it on the table, and your mother will look at it and your father will look at it, and Margaret will reach for it and say, "After supper." And after supper the lamp will come up and the pages will turn and the light will fall across everything you might want and most of what you need and some of what you'll actually get. The Wish Book, the Bible of the Prairie, 1,000 miles from Chicago, 2 pounds and 3 ounces of paper and ink, and the specific kind of hope that comes from knowing exactly what something costs. Let it go now. Let the catalogue close itself in the dark. Let the wind do the work of the night. Let Kansas settle into the deep cold quiet that comes after everyone is inside and the animals are still and the land is just land, waiting for spring the way land waits, without urgency, without doubt, just with the long patience of something that has been here since before any of this, and will be here after. You've earned the rest. The lamp is out, the stove is banked, the catalogue is on the table, and the night is very long and very quiet, and you're already most of the way gone, into whatever the sleep of November on the Kansas plains gives you. This is 1897. The country is changing. The catalogue is part of how it's changing. The change is slow, and it doesn't feel like change from inside it. It just feels like a pump that works and a list that's slightly longer this year than last year. But centuries will pass. The sod houses will be replaced with wood frame houses, then with houses with running water and electric lights, then with houses connected to a network that lets you buy anything you want from anywhere in the world by tapping a small glass rectangle in your pocket. The catalogue will close. The company that made it will become something else several times over, changing shape as the world changes the way it needs things. The wheat fields will still be there. The wind will still be there. People will still sit at tables with lists of things they need and things they want and be doing the same calculation, the same ancient arithmetic of what's possible and what's wanted and where the two lines meet. Some things don't change. The wanting doesn't change. The work doesn't change. The feeling of lying down at the end of a full day in a cold November in a world that is hard and beautiful and exactly what it is, that doesn't change. Let sleep take you the way it took a boy from Ohio in a sod house in Kansas in the last years of the century that made America. Let the wind go quiet. Let the list wait until morning. Let the catalogue stay closed. You're warm enough. You're safe enough. You've done enough for one day. The night is long. The morning is coming. But not yet. Not yet. Good night.